Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Space Engineers Plus Me, episode 16. I'm Enigmius, and today we're continuing with this giant build that we started in the last episode. The last episode we basically just put the wheels in place and built a framework that connected them all together, and now we're going to expand on that. We're going to talk a little bit about the overall plan for this vehicle, and then we're going to get down to the business of assembling things. I made a very large cockpit, and it's instead of the pre-made cockpit that you just plunk down and it's there, it's done, welded it up and it's good to go. I used a control chair, and then I built this great big angled window, and I learned a lot about the glass in this game because it's polarized. This glass, you can see we're looking through this square section. You can't really see very well through it, but if you look just to the right, that angled section, you can see the rocks on the other side. It's because the polarization, you can see through it one way, but you can't really see very well through the other. And it's important to understand that it doesn't really explain it very well in the game itself, but once you see it and you start putting two and two together, it makes a little bit more sense. There's inverted versions of the glass as well, which means it's polarized from the other direction to make it easier, I guess, to line everything up. But I got it figured out. I got it sorted. The cockpit is kind of a minor detail. It's not the most important part of the ship. It's where you go to do all the important things, but realistically speaking, it's all the other things that we put on the ship that are going to determine how much use we can get out of it. I'm creating a surface here, basically a flat, closed surface instead of the open frame that we had, because this back section of the vehicle is going to house a lot of the equipment that we're going to be carrying around to support the vehicle in doing things other than drilling. The front section between the cockpit and the rear section is going to be where the drills are, and then the back section is going to be all of the utility. So the first utility is the reactor. We're using a large reactor. This is going to take uranium and convert it to power. This thing is huge. It's very large, and it requires a lot of materials. So there's a lot of running back and forth between the reactor and our base storage, gathering components, welding them to the reactor, going and gathering more components, welding them to the reactor over and over and over again until the reactor is finally done. I hope it'll be worth it. I hope that this single reactor is going to be able to power everything that we need to do on this particular section of the vehicle, so that we don't have to worry too much about power like we do with all the solar powered stuff. Solar power and batteries is great because it's basically free once it's built. The power is being generated for free and stored. It's just, it takes so long to get anything done. So you can see we've got it all welded up now. It's all done. The reactor is done. And now we can start looking at other things. The whole goal with this vehicle and ship, I guess you could say, is there's going to be two sections. There's going to be the ground-based section that we're working on now, and there's going to be the air-based section that will have additional utility services on board, but more importantly, we'll be able to pick up the ground-based section and help it move around the map. So one of the things that we'll probably end up doing is flying around searching for lakes, using the ground-based section to dig the hell out of the lakes, and then having the air-based section to pick it up then and move it to the next lake that we can find until it's time to go back and unload. That's basically the idea that we're going for right now. So in order to make this viable, we can do extended trips if we can do processing on board. So we're using arc furnaces here. Now I've set up 3 of these in our outpost. The nice thing about arc furnaces is that they're small relative to refineries. They process at about the same base speed as refineries, and they use roughly the same power. It becomes a situation where the advantage that the refineries have is that you can add the productivity modules to them so that they use less power, or they produce faster, or they get more ingots out of the ore that you're processing. The downside, of course, is the size. They're absolutely massive. By having the arc furnaces, we can get more processing going on in the same space, which in our case is very good because it's on a ship, not a base. But more importantly, very important to note, is that with the arc furnaces, you can only process iron, nickel, and cobalt. So anything else you have to store, but being able to process the iron, nickel, and cobalt on board means that those finished products are going to take less space, use less, require less lifting because of the weight than if they were just in their raw ore state. So we're not necessarily doing a total processing on the ship, certainly not on the ground-based unit, but it's helping the little bit of processing we're doing. Now, I realized that maybe I wasn't happy with where the reactor was. So I was like, I'll grind it down, and I wanted to rotate it 90 degrees. And it punched a hole not only in the floor of the ship, but also through the deck of the platform we're building the ship on. So I reloaded the autosave because I didn't really want to go running around looking for all the reactor components that were scattered across the mountain as they bounced down after punching a hole through everything. It's another one of those things where you see it and part of you is like, oh man, and the other part of you thinks it's really amusing. So it was a learning experience. When you have to run back and forth to your storage so many times to get the components to build the reactor, they're going to be heavy. And when you reclaim those components, they're not all going to fit in your inventory. And when they fall, they're going to punch holes in things. That's very useful bit of information. Glad we got that sorted out. So we left the reactor the way it was. It wasn't a big deal. It was more just having the ports for the reactor to interface with conveyors and stuff like that a little more accessible, but that was about it. It was a preference thing, not a necessity thing. You can see here we've got 3 conveyors that are connected to the arc furnaces so that we can put 3 more arc furnaces that will also be connected to those conveyors, and then they'll be able to share resources. As the ore comes in, we'll be able to send it to the conveyors, and then from the conveyors it'll be distributed amongst the arc furnaces, and then when the arc furnaces are done processing, they'll be able to send the finished ingots out into storage. Very simple, very straightforward, and I kind of underestimated, or I guess I should say overestimated, the amount of space that I would have on this ship because it's so massive. When you look at it from the ground, it is absolutely enormous. But by the time you start putting the large ship components on it, the amount of space that you have to work with shrinks quite rapidly. I didn't want this thing to be so massive that it was going to be a pain in the ass to have the second module, the flying module, hook up to it. But at the same time, you know, there's certain things that we need to get done, and we want to be able to take advantage of those extra benefits of having, you know, all these large storage capacities on the ship, and the processing capacities, and the power output capacities, and all these different things. So we had to do a little bit of thinking. One of the things that I realized is we've got this flow of materials coming from the ore that we're drilling up into the arc furnaces, from the arc furnaces into storage, so it makes sense that we put the storage off the back of the ship. And the storage that we're using is the large ship version of the large storage container, and this is about the same size as the reactor. It is enormous. I have one on our outpost already. The storage capacity makes it well worthwhile, and there's a weight to size ratio of having the thing. There's numbers, and they're better with the large container than if we had used the same number of small containers required to match the storage capacity. I guess that makes sense. If the words made sense to you, then the understanding is behind them, so you can get to it on your own. The bottom line is we're setting ourselves up so we've got quite substantial storage off the back of this vehicle. We can go out, we can do extended mining trips, we can process stuff, we can save weight, we can save space by processing a lot of the materials that we're bringing on board, and then we can store them in large quantities so that when we head back to the outpost, we've got a significant amount of stuff to show for our efforts. Because really, when you get right down to it, if this vehicle works in the way that we expect it to, our next major goal will be to build a ship that can get us to the moon of this planet. We're going to need to account for the different environmental aspects. We aren't necessarily going to be able to pop our helmet off and breathe oxygen. It's going to be one of those things where we have to be thinking in terms of real survival, having access to these resources like oxygen, and not having a base to run back to whenever we run out of stuff. So we're going to have to build a large enough ship to accommodate everything that we need, and it's going to take a ton of resources that we're struggling to get right now just to build this ship to go get the resources. So that's kind of the goal. Is there's a progression that we're working towards. I kind of want to make sure that when we build the airborne section of this project, that we seal it up properly so that maybe we could take this whole thing to the moon. If it turns out to be a good solid mining vessel, we can just lift the whole thing up and take it off to the moon and take care of business there. But we might be getting ahead of ourselves as far as that goes. So now I'm basically just connecting the arc furnaces, the storage in the arc furnaces, to the giant storage container, and then we wanted a connector so that this giant container on the ground-based unit can interface with the storage on the air-based unit when we build that one, and be able to do it cleanly and tidily and all those other fun things that we like to do. There's a lot of time and effort put into doing like the exterior hull on a ship like this, just because there's all kinds of different angles we can play with and different blocks that allow us to exploit those angles. I didn't want to spend a ton of time showing all of that off, because it's just placing a block and then spinning the block and then placing another block and spinning that block and then destroying them both, grinding them down and doing it with two different blocks just to see what the angles look like. It's a lot of fiddly business that we can show you in small amounts here and there, and maybe some things that I do will give you some ideas. But in terms of the 3.5 hours worth of footage, most of which was spent spinning blocks that won't be included in this video, I don't feel bad for leaving it out. It's just too much. But you get the idea now. We've built the large storage container, we've attached a connector to it, and then we just build a hull around it so that it's got a little bit of protection from whatever we need to protect it from, whatever that happens to be. So you can see now we've closed in both the reactor and the storage container. There's obviously some work left to be done detailing the outside of the hull. I call it sculpting, when we've got basically everything is closed in and then we look at it and we think it's okay, but it doesn't quite look right. There's lots of opportunities to go back and make adjustments later, but for now, again, focusing on the function, we've got these conveyors that are running between the two rows of arc furnaces, and this is where we want to build in the conveyor tubes that will connect the conveyors that feed the arc furnaces with the drills that are going to be extracting the ore. Really simple and straightforward, and the way we set things up is any ore that the arc furnaces can't use will be able to bypass the conveyors feeding the arc furnaces and go directly to storage. So hopefully we've done it properly, but it's one of those things where if we don't do it now, getting this connection in place and ready, we could forget, and then we build too much around it, and then getting in place after the fact is too much of a headache. We want to avoid that kind of a situation. We like to avoid the headaches whenever possible. We're starting to run low on materials, so we're going to have to do a little bit of mining. I actually went on a mining trip, and this was weird. I wish I could say it was funny or, whatever. It was just weird. I filled up the little red wagon, our little cargo hauler, from our favorite place to mine iron. It's just down the hill from our outpost. It was absolutely full. I was very happy with the amount of iron that we got. It took a while. It took about an hour and a half to extract enough iron to make that happen. Flew it up to our base, landed, the connectors connected, and then the iron disappeared. It wasn't on the ship. It wasn't anywhere in the outpost. It just disappeared. And I was so disappointed because it took so long to get the iron. I don't mind necessarily crashing a ship, because we can just reload. That's not that big of a deal. But the way the saves work is that by the time I realized that the iron had disappeared, it had already auto-saved and saved over the spot where we would have had it on our ship to try again. So I used the Space Engineer's toolkit to edit in an equivalent amount of iron. No bonuses, no hardship, whatever. Just there was a bug that happened that ate our iron. I would like that back to save the time of having to go back and gathering it again. And it just gave it to me in this one massive chunk of iron that basically landed on my head as soon as I loaded into the game after editing the iron into the save, and killed me. So I was killed by this massive boulder of iron, and then I had to gather it chunk by chunk and feed it into our system so that we could process it and get everything out of it. All that because, oops, there's a bit of a problem here with the setup. Things aren't working the way we would expect them to. So we're going to go back. We're going to mine some more iron properly, normally, the way we normally would, so that we have enough materials to finish the project. The next episode, we're going to put in the drills and the support structure for the drills. Probably have some finishing touches on the hull, and basically be as close to done as we can get with what we've got, so that the episode after that we can start on the airborne module, and we'll go from there. So it's massive. It's just massive, and this is fun for me. After playing other games, building vehicles with the voxel stuff on a smaller scale, being able to do things on such a massive scale is just really, really entertaining to me. So we're going to continue that, and I'm really optimistic about how it's going to turn out. It's going to take a while, but we're going to get there. If you want to be notified when I add the next episode, the easiest way to do that, as always, is subscribe to my channel or follow me on Twitter. Link for Twitter is in the information box below the video, at Enigmius1. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.